Welcome to your Daily 5 for Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. I think the last time I watched the Walter Hill film Streets of Fire, it had to be 15, 16 years ago. And we were doing the show back then, but I don't think at that time we were really doing movie reviews the way we do now. I couldn't find any evidence that I actually ever reviewed the movie. I may have mentioned it here and there, but I don't think we ever actually really talked about it in depth. And Lando had never seen it. So for this week's film that we watched together, which we'll talk about on Friday, we watched 1984's Streets of Fire, which was Walter Hill, who did The Warriors. If you don't know that name, if you're not familiar, you're probably familiar with The Warriors or 48 Hours. And 48 Hours was the movie that just came out right before this one. And based on that success, this movie, I think, was kind of a do whatever you want type of film where Walter Hill attempted to make a film that he says would have appealed to him as a teenager. And essentially, in many ways, if you've seen The Warriors, you've more or less seen this film. And I don't say that as a negative. I don't think there's anything wrong with repeating a formula that works if you add new things to it. And what is added new to it is much more of a musical film. And in fact, here's something I don't say often. I don't think it's musical enough, to be honest. We'll talk about that on Friday. We'll talk about it in detail. But it's basically a fantasy film about a man who comes back to a town that he had left a long time ago when his sweetheart from when he was younger is abducted by a ridiculous biker gang. And the movie is, it is something to behold because visually, and in terms of the soundtrack, it is stellar, top to bottom. There's really nothing negative I would say about how this movie looks. I love the songs. Lando agrees. Again, we'll talk about that together on Friday. But in terms of everything outside of the core story, and in particular, one weak point of the cast, there's really nothing to complain about in this movie. The problem is, and what keeps it from being held in the same type of esteem as something like The Warriors, is that the main hero of the film is played by Michael Pare, who can act, but has chosen for some reason not to in this film, a problem which might not be so noticeable. In fact, in The Warriors, not everybody in The Warriors is a great actor, but everybody's basically on relatively the same level, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas in Streets of Fire, probably because now there was more money and more ability to get higher profile people, Michael Pare is surrounded by actors who are far better than he is, which only highlights the deficiency of your hero, who already is supposed to, at least based on the way the film presents him, he's already supposed to be an unlikable character in many ways. And when he can't emote properly, it does leave this big gaping hole in the film that is tough to overlook, I think, for a lot of people. It's still a very fun film. I would still recommend people watch it. But again, I think about this movie and something like The Warriors, which is very similar. And The Warriors is such a better film because the way the story is handled, I think, is smarter, in that there is a constant threat that is peppered throughout. So you get these kind of sequences where it's relax, tension. And Streets of Fire starts off with an excellent musical number and ends with an excellent musical number, but does not punctuate its scenes with enough of those type of musical numbers. And as it's already supposed to not really be a realistic film, it is supposed to be presented as a fantasy, I don't know why there wasn't more music used to kind of break up the different sequences. I think it would have helped the film tremendously. Now, I'm saying all this and it sounds like I'm giving the movie a negative review, and I really wouldn't say that. I think it's a very fun film. And again, we'll talk about this on Friday. Lando's of a similar mind. But I realize that one of the reasons I haven't watched this in so long is because if it's between this and The Warriors, I'm going to pick The Warriors every time because it feels like Streets of Fire should be the movie that came first, and The Warriors came later, where it perfected this idea of this type of formula. But instead, it's the inverse. So it's beautifully shot. The visuals are great. The soundtrack is wonderful. Many of the performances outside of your lead hero are actually really, really good. The problem is that when the character that the movie largely hangs on is so forgettable, it does kind of blunt the power of the film. So Streets of Fire, really fun, worth watching, but will you visit it often? Well, I don't, but your mileage may vary. Later.